sales system, the right sales process with an actual sales team in there. So how do we either create or refine our sales system? It also gives you a map to optimize the sales process so that you sell more and that you have more success with that part.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel. In this episode, I want to talk about how can you create a sales system, the right sales process with an actual sales team in there, with actual human beings who are doing selling. So I know we've talked at various times about using technology to sell, but what about if you have a sales force, whether that's one salesperson that goes out in the field and make calls, or you have a sales team of 212 people who are selling in multiple countries. So how do we either create or refine our sales system? That's what we're talking about here right now. And the value to you when you learn it is, I'm going to give you an insight about thinking about your sales system as a funnel, such that we can optimize each of the key steps along the way to increase conversion rates so that you sell more and that you have more success with that part. You can retain your best salespeople because they're making more money, and you, as a business owner, are more profitable and more able to have an impact serving more customers and clients. So let's do this. And where it comes from is a little bit over 2 months ago now, we had done our Sales Mastery Bootcamp. It was one of the quarterly series of advanced workshops we do for our business coaching clients. And this one, it was the owners of the companies came with their sales forces to get trained and their sales managers. And in several cases, they brought their key marketing leader and or their key technology leader to see how this all ties in and how they could support sales so that the company as a whole could sell more of its goods and services. And I want to share with you something really important. It was obvious at that event, as we started talking through, that there was a way of looking at creating your sales process that was different than how most of them in the room came into that room. And I want to share with you a better way of doing it. So the first step I'm going to ask you to consider doing is I want you to think about your sales process as a funnel. And so what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to ask you to literally map it out. I want you to map out each step in your sales process. So leads come in, and you might have 3 different lead sources that leads are coming in from. We'll call those lead sources A, B, and C. They come into that first step, we'll call that box 1. And then that first step in that box 1 leads to the second step in your sales process, which we'll lay out as box 2. And I'm going to come back and visually show you what that might look like. Now, for those of you who are this audio and the podcast, like I don't actually watch podcast videos. I tend to listen to them audio because I like to listen to them in my car or when I'm taking a nice walk or exercising. If you are, I'll do my best to describe in word pictures what I'm doing. But if you're able, those people who are watching this video, whether it be on YouTube or one of the other video podcast platforms, are going to have a little bit of an easier time because they're seeing me actually draw this out on my whiteboard here in my studio. So I'll give you both ways to do that. But you have arrows coming in with marked A, B, and C for the various lead sources. You know, lead source A might be, for example, walk-in traffic. Lead source B might be people who are through your pay-per-click campaigns. And lead source C might be people through a particular advertisement that you have in an industry publication. Again, I'm making that up. So sales step number 1 for you, it could be lots of things. We're going to pretend that sales step number 1 for you is what I'll talk about as the intake. So the purpose of the intake for you in this business, I'm giving you an example for Acme Inc., the purpose of that might be 3 things. It might be number 1, to quickly capture the name and the email and the phone of the person that's there. So we now know that that lead, who they are. You know, it's Joe Smith, an email of joe@jnjnj.com, and a phone number of 555-1344. Second thing on that intake might be that I leave a very good impression so that I don't spoil a lead. The third thing might be that I set up, we'll call a qualifying call number 2. So in our imaginary purpose here, step 1, notice what I've done. I've visually laid it out. So by box 1, I put down what we name that step, which in this case we're calling it the intake. I said, what's the purpose of this step? The purpose of this step is to capture the person's name, email, and phone number. The purpose of the step is to leave a good impression so we don't spoil the lead. The purpose of the step is to set up an actual qualifying appointment. Now that is internal language. We wouldn't probably say that to a prospect, but that's what we're going to talk about next. So step 2 in our process here, we're going to call this the qualifying call. Again, I'm making this up. Your business is going to have different sales processes. You'll have different arrows in different boxes. But by laying it out visually, where you have box 1 with an arrow to box 2, I'll go back and show you how this is going to automatically help you know how to set your CRM up to track the sales steps and stages along the way. It's going to help you set up your tracking of key performance indicators and targets about how conversion is going. Everything else is going to come out of what's on this flow chart on the board. This flow chart that's on the board is really what I would look at as your sales strategy, laid out in a very visual way. So step 2, this qualifying call, it's going to have, what is its purpose? Number 1, we're going to say the purpose is to qualify the lead, right? Qualify them for budget, qualify them for product and service need, qualify them for a sense of urgency, qualify them for decision-making authority, qualify them for whatever it is that you qualify for. Usually it's going to be about a real need for your product and service, certain type of urgency or motivation around that, not always, but usually, money to some basic level of qualification, and decision authority. That's probably what you're going to qualify on, at least certainly in our fictitious example here, that's what's going to happen. And based on that, the outcome of this call is, if they're qualified, to set up what I'll call the final appointment. And the final appointment would be the sales appointment. So again, we're making this a multi-step process. Yours might be a one-step process. Yours might be complicated with a long sales cycle that might take you 7 steps over the course of 5.5 months to sell with 3 levels of decision-making authority. So now the next step is going to go for us, and here's to step number 3. And in box number 3, we're going to call box number 3, we'll come up with a name for it. Let's call this the final appointment is the name of the stage. And again, we ask, what is the purpose of that part? The purpose of that is to requalify in more detail. The purpose of this one might be to build motivation and value so that number 3, you can actually close the sale. Great. So now let's think about this. We've got the process laid out. Ideally, this is what it flows like. And now what we get to do is we get to ask ourselves the question, if we had 100 people come into step number 1, and of those 100 people this month that came into step number 1, if 60 of them ended up doing a qualifying phone call, that means 60 out of 100 did that, which means the conversion from step 1 to step 2, in our example here, is 60%. For every 1 that comes in here, 0.6 shows up the other way. For every 100, 60 go through. And of those 60 who do a qualifying call, let's pretend, just for our sake of making this easy on this, let's pretend that 30 of them end up at the final appointment, which means 30 of them have a preliminary qualification and they are willing to set up that final conversation with one of your sales team members, which in this case gives you a 50% conversion. And now, based on this, the people are going to come out of here, and some are going to say yes, and some are going to say no. The people who say yes, let's do our example. Let's say out of the 30 who came on here, let's say that 10 said yes. So in this case, you've got a conversion rate of 33.3% that said yes. And probably if I had more space on my board, these no's would come into some kind of step number 4, which would be a follow-up process. And And that follow-up process might itself have several more steps and stages along the way with it. But we're going to leave it at this because it's enough for us to share how do we use what we've just drawn out here on this whiteboard, whether you want to do it on a whiteboard with markers like I did, or you want to do it on a wall with sticky notes and post-it notes, or you want to do it like I have a client that we work with that loved doing it with a graphics program on PowerPoint where they would use the arrows and shapes in PowerPoint. I like the visceral feel of doing it on a whiteboard. One of my office rooms, I have a conference room in my office that has whiteboards on 2 of the 3 walls. I love going in there with my pens and covering the walls with that. But here's what we do next. Now that we've agreed upon, and who should be in the decision for this, it should be your sales leader. It should also be your marketing leader. And you're going to also want your technology person to be listening in if that person is different than your marketing leader. So once we agree on it, that this is the process we want to follow, the steps and stages, here's the cool part. We've already designed through what needs to happen next. So now my technology person has to make sure that our CRM has in our sales funnel the following steps and stages. We make sure we have an intake step, and we need to have certain call dispositions that say on step number 1, here's what can happen. The person can hang up. The person can give their full contact information. The person can set up a qualifying conversation, right? And move to step 2. So we want to put the call outcomes in a standardized way because it lets us pull reporting in an automated way. Then at step 2, we want to say how many people showed up at that step, and now the tracking of that is very easy. And what was the outcome? How many of them were qualified? The call disposition was they were no-show, or they rescheduled, or they held the appointment but were not qualified. They held the appointment and were qualified, but it stopped right there, or they held the appointment, were qualified, and in fact set call number 3, the final appointment. And so for each of these steps and stages, I'm now in the CRM going to make sure I map it out in my database, in my CRM, so that now what it allows me to do is I can follow the funnel through. And let's say I've got 3 different salespeople. I can follow through and I can say for Sylvia, we can pull a report and say, Sylvia, here's where you stand. You've got 300 people in your sales pipeline for you this month. Of those, X went to stage number 2, Y went to stage number 3 with that part. It's all there, and it makes managing your salespeople so much easier, and it makes training your salespeople so much easier because I can look for which of these conversion points are they most struggling with. Your technical person can take this diagram and you tell them saying, look, I want you to map out whether we do it through a spreadsheet or you set it up online with a Google Data Studio or something along the lines of however you want to present the information. Ideally, it's automated in real time using some kind of API call, etc. Or it can be manually done at first, but at some point it needs to be automated such that I want to be able to tell for each of my red arrows that go between one step in the process to the other, I want to know what the conversion points are. I want to know, a scoreboard says, David, at step 1 we had X number of leads come in, of which Y number went to step 2 for a conversion point of blank percent. And then of those Y number of people who went to step 2, Z number went to step 3 for a conversion between the two of X percent. I want to do that so I can see it. And then as a sales manager, here's what it allows me to do. Whether I'm an owner of a business and I'm managing a sales force of 2 or 3 people, or I've hired a sales manager and she's managing a sales force of 14 people on my behalf, she can look at which step along the way do we have the biggest drop-off that would make the most sense to work to make better. Those of you that have a marketing background will recognize what I'm talking about here is called conversion rate optimization. We take this funnel and we look for the weak links and we prioritize the weak links as the places we want to make better. So for example, if I found that between step 1 and step 2, we had a big drop-off, and it was the fact that a lot of people were not showing up on their call number 2 appointments. Well, how can I maybe I can have text reminders go out or change the text of my text reminders. Maybe I should have somebody make sure they send a confirming email. Maybe I need to do better about a drip email sequence. Maybe I need to change the process so they can only schedule those appointments 1 or 2 weeks in the future, not a month or 2 in the future. Maybe I need to And those are all things I can do to improve that one conversion point. So wherever I go, if the conversion point is low, I can put my best talent from my sales leader, from my technology person, and from my marketing leader to solve that conversion point to make it better. And then we track the results in real life. Now, not only does doing this process laid out visually like this from box to box to box, mapping out conversion point to conversion point to conversion point, help your marketing person know what's going on to set up the CRM with your technical folks, to set up the actual scoreboard to see how things are going from a numeric perspective. But as a sales leader, now I can look at that and say, I need scripting for step number 1. I need scripting for step number 2. I need scripting for step number 3. And there are certain types of sales collateral that I need. Some of that sales collateral might be, if I have my marketing person, her name is Jody, I can say, Jody, I'm going to need to have a good follow-up email that once we set the appointment, that the system auto-generates to go back to the person who set the appointment for a qualifying call. I need you to do that and do it well. I'm going to also, if the appointment is more than 4 days out, going to need some kind of drip email reminder sequence that's going to help make sure that that appointment is held. And it's held in a way that the lead is more excited about that. Right? So I can tell my marketer what collateral I need. Maybe I need a white paper from them. Maybe I need a web page for me to use when doing this qualifying call. Maybe I need a video that gets sent to people, a 3-minute video beforehand. Maybe I can put together my list of what I need as a sales leader so that my marketing team knows what I need from them. At the raw level, the sales manager knows that he or she needs to create scripting for each of these steps along the way and the very basic fundamental collateral, and then we can improve from there. So what we've done here is by looking at our sales as a funnel and we're mapping it out visually, not only does it help us talk through and agree upon what's the best process, what are the steps and stages along the way. Hey, someone calls in, we don't want that person perhaps trying to make the sale on the first phone call. They should set the appointment. Or maybe in your company, they don't set the appointment, they do a live warm transfer. Hey, I would be happy to get to our sales department. Let me transfer you there now. I'll stay on the line while we're waiting here. David, I've got Sheila on the line here to talk with you, right? So by visually mapping it out, I can agree upon what's the best practice for us to do that. It has inherent in there, how do I set up my CRM? How do I set up my tracking scoreboard? All of which are incredibly important. And it gives direct guidance to the sales manager about what scripting and sales collateral tools are needed, and he or she now knows what they have to build out. And then when I start following this, I now have a map to train my sales team members on here's how the sales process works visually. Here's each step along the way. Here's what your sales outcome or sales goal is of each step along the way. At step 2 here, you're doing a qualifying call. Your goal is not to actually sell the product. Your goal is to qualify the lead preliminary and to set up the final appointment. We've learned that by doing that spread out, it's better. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe in your business, it's call number 2 is the closing conversation. My point being is it gives you a framework to train your sales team to. And when you do this, not only does it help you make your sales process better, it also gives you a map to optimize the sales process conversion point by conversion point over time, which means less raw changes that you don't know what is or isn't working. You can be more scientific about the changes that you're making. You can be much more focused about the changes so you make leverage changes on the conversion point that's weakest at any given time. What you'll find is at different points in time, one conversion point will be giving you trouble. You make it better. And that will expose the next weak link that you'll then have to make that conversion point better. This is how we go about making our sales system better step by step by step, relentlessly. 1, 2, 3 with those parts. It makes such a difference to do that. So what are your most important coaching takeaways? What do I have for you to do? Number 1, this would be a perfect time for you to simply lay out your box-to-box flow chart of how your sales funnel works. What is the step 1 with the sales funnel? What's step 2? What's step 3? I will note that depending on your business complexity or scale, many of our clients with larger companies, they sell different products or different service lines that might each have a different sales process for it. So don't try to make them all. Pick the one or two that would give you the most value to make those funnels better. That's step one. Step two is once you've got that box-to-box chart through, where each step along the way you've identified with a name and what it is that's the sales purpose or outcome of that step along the way, what we went through here with our 3 boxes. Then you set up a meeting. That meeting is going to have whoever's in charge of your sales team, whoever's in charge of your marketing, whoever's in charge of your technology. Now, it might very well be that one person plays more than one role in that part if you're a small company. If you're a large company, that's probably 3 different individuals. If you're a small company, they might all 3 be you, the owner of the business. I don't know which it is for you. You're probably somewhere in between. So whether you're a person with 9 people who work for you, including 1 salesperson and you who do 2.1 million a year in sales, that's probably you doing all these steps with an outsourced technology person to handle the CRM programming for you. If you're a $75 million a year company, you have someone who's in charge of marketing that can sit in that meeting. You probably have a technology person who can sit in that meeting. You probably have your sales manager who's running that meeting. And you're probably not needed at all as the owner of the business, although maybe you sit in and see what kind of value you can add. And that's your second step. Get that right people in the room to have the meeting to go through to agree upon the box-to-box sales process, and from there to map out who owns what needs to happen with the CRM, who owns what needs to happen with in terms of creation of the scoreboard or refinement of your sales scoreboard, who owns creating the scripting, who owns creating the other sales collateral that's there, and what's the timeline to get those things done. Now, generally, to do what I've just described there and create a basic level, if you've got nothing in place, level of scripting and do this, you're looking at somewhere between 1, possibly 2 quarters to get that in place. If you've already got that, then now you're just formalizing. You can certainly do that within a quarter and pick one of these conversion points to make even better. All right. I wish you every success in applying these ideas to your business to increase sales, to make your sales pillar scalable, more durable, and quite frankly, more enjoyable for you, the owner, to run it, whether directly doing that or managing the person who manages it. Thank you for joining me in this session.